The most iconic villain in British sci-fi history is the Daleks. First appearing in 1964, the race of genetically engineered xenophobic space fascists have been synonymous with Britain, Doctor Who, and sci-fi in general. With an iconic design and almost 60 years of film, comics, books, and games to go off of, the Daleks are going to be a tough villain to tackle, and as such I will be probably splitting this video up into approximately 5 parts, which will focus on what I'll call the original Daleks, from the first and second Doctor's run, the post-Evil of the Daleks, pre-Davros Daleks, the post-Davros Classic Series Daleks, Russell T Davies' Daleks, and then I'll combine the Moffat and Chibnall era Daleks into one video. This video is devoted to the original Daleks. Coloured in blue and silver, the Daleks are an eerie race of cyborgs from the planet Skaro. The Daleks have faced numerous retcons over the years of the show and fluctuating power levels, but they first appeared in The Dead Planet. In this story, William Hartnell's first Doctor, Susan, Ian and Barbara land on a mysterious planet that has been ravaged by nuclear war. While exploring, they find a very advanced city, and explore it and come face to ice talk with the Daleks. In this story, the Daleks are a race of mutants who, after a long war with their ancient enemies, the Thals, mutated and retreated underground to survive Skaro's irradiated surface. The Daleks take an interest in these intruders and begin to question them. The Daleks live inside an armoured casing that features a sucker arm that can interact with technology and manipulate objects, a gun capable of paralysing and killing other creatures, and an eye stalk for vision. Their technology level is very high, but they cannot leave their city as their casings are powered by static electricity, which is given to them by the floor of the city. Realising the Thals are still alive, the Daleks, who were once another race of creatures called the Dals, that lived on the surface with the Thals, but after years of war with them, they were presumed dead. They now want to exterminate the Thals by detonating another neutron bomb and turning Skaro into a nuclear wasteland that only they can survive. They were thwarted by the Doctor, his companions and the Thals when they attacked the Dalek city and stopped the bomb from going off. In the process, they also disabled the Daleks' power supply, turning off their casings. Without the casings, the Daleks soon died out. And that was the first appearance of the Daleks. In a vacuum, I really like this story. It is one of the few where the Daleks actually make sense. The Daleks, from a sort of objective standpoint, are impossible to take seriously for pretty much all of Doctor Who. Their design has a lot of serious flaws, and you begin to wonder how the hell they can even build anything, let alone conquer the universe. But in this story, it actually makes sense. All the technology was built before they were forced into their casings, and the city is designed specifically for them. And all the themes that would later come to be embraced by the Daleks more thoroughly, such as their extreme xenophobia and desire to exterminate all inferior races, are present here, but are a little less pronounced. These Daleks are a credible threat because they are actually built for the story as well. Their success wasn't really expected, and they were responsible for catapulting Doctor Who into the public consciousness back in the 60s, and were slated to return, even though it makes literally no sense, because the Daleks all die out at the end of the story, but anyway. The Daleks would return, still in 1964, in The Daleks' Invasion of Earth. Given their massive success with the British public, it was inevitable that the Daleks would return, and this time they have not only somehow survived their apparent final end, which will be a continuing problem for them going forward, but they are now spacefaring and have somehow conquered the Earth in the year 2164. Okay. The Daleks have taken over the Earth and are turning people into Robomen, which are robotic servants that can do all the manual labour for them. The Doctor and co reappear in this London and realise the Daleks have somehow taken over the planet. However, as usual, there is a resistance against the tyranny of the Daleks, and the Doctor and his companions obviously end up helping out. They learn that the Daleks invaded about 10 years ago after crippling the planet with plagues that wiped out a lot of the population, and the Daleks themselves took control. It turns out that this time the Daleks' dastardly plan is to dig all the way to the centre of the Earth, blow up the Earth's core, and then replace the Earth's core with an engine, so they can drive the planet around the universe. Like a spaceship. What? You have Skaro, you dumbass. Just do that. Like, whatever. So the Doctor and Co stops them by blowing up the bomb they were going to use to destroy the Earth's core prematurely, which somehow destroys the Dalek mothership and most of the Daleks for some reason, and then the Doctor just imitates a Dalek and gets the Robomen to attack the remaining Daleks. Sure. So I've never actually watched this story. I think when I was a kid I saw there was like the Peter Cushing movies, and this was like the second one, like a remake of this. But Anyway, it sounds like it starts off well. It builds on the Dalek lore nicely, and their invasion is surprisingly believable, actually. You know, having the whole plague thing, and then they invade afterwards, that's actually shows, like, pretty good strategy there. And having the Robomen as, like, a humanoid worker class, it makes the Dalek civilization make a lot more sense, with having a slave class that can do all the manual labour that the Daleks themselves are incapable of doing. And the Daleks themselves are like a warrior caste, you know. That actually makes sense, which is something the Daleks... They just don't make sense. But anyway, the story is pretty silly though, and there is no explanation for how they survived their apparent final demise on Skaro back in the first episode. But anyway, the Daleks next appeared in the absolute fever dream of an episode called The Chase. Written by Terry Nation still, and premiering in 1965, this story shows a group of Daleks chasing the Doctor out and about through time and space, so they can travel in time now. You'd think that this would be a bigger problem than it is, like they could just go back in time and kill Adam and Eve or something and stop humanity from ever evolving. But no, they go on a wild space adventure on pirate ships and literally fight Count Dracula and Frankenstein's monster. So this was just basically Terry Nation trying to pitch the Daleks for their own show, which is one of the dumbest ideas I've ever heard. I've never actually seen this from start to finish, but this clip should be enough to explain why.
Obliterate! I am Count Dracula. Don't go. Don't go. Don't go. Don't go. Don't go. Don't go. Don't go.
So anyway, the next time the Daleks show up is still in 1965, and is the only standalone episode of the original series other than the Five Doctors. And it is the last episode to be produced by Verity Lambert. And it doesn't have the Doctor in it at all. So it's quite interesting. It's literally just a prequel to Dalek's Master Plan, and features a space policeman investigating some Dalek activity, being proven right, and then being killed. And then the Daleks vow they're going to conquer the universe, starting with the Earth for some reason. Their story is also notable because it's missing. The only way to watch it is through recreations, something that plagues a lot of the stories I'm about to talk about. So anyway, cut to the Daleks' Master Plan, which is the longest single Doctor Who episode of all time. It features the Daleks trying to conquer the world again. This time the Daleks have made an alliance with a bunch of other galactic empires, and they're going to use a device called the Time Destructor to... Well, you'd think destroy time, but that's not actually what it does. What it does do is kills all life on a planet by hyper-accelerating time, so everyone just ages to death. Which is a pretty cool idea. Anyway, so the Doctor nicks the power core or something, and the Daleks pursue him, and they both crash land on this prison planet. Then after a bizarre time-hopping story featuring iconic returning Doctor Who villain, the Meddling Monk, the Daleks then catch back up to the Doctor and get the core for their machine back, but the Doctor manages to steal the Time Destructor and says he'll set it off on the planet unless the Daleks let him go. So in the commotion, the Doctor sets off the device but manages to escape, but the Daleks cannot deactivate in time and they all get aged to dust. And what even was the master plan here? They just had a generic doomsday So that was the last time Willy Bum Bum ever saw the Daleks. The Daleks next appeared in Power of the Daleks, which was the second Doctor story, so that's pretty cool. It's also completely missing. No episodes at all remain in this one. In this, the Doctor shows up on this planet and the people there mistake him for some inspector who has come to inspect a crashed spaceship. However, when they pop it open, they find two Daleks and one Dalek mutant inside it and a destroyed casing. The Doctor warns the humans about the Daleks, but the Daleks reactivate and begin to help the humans out. So the Dalek mutant escapes, and they got to look for it, but this Doctor guy, not the Doctor, just a scientist, is being more sneaky and probably working with the Daleks. So he's a pesky rebel. There's the rebel movement among the humans anyway. Basically the entire thing plays out like Victory of the Daleks, with the Daleks absolutely duping the humans into letting them build an entire army of them in secret, somehow. And then when a civil war between the humans breaks out, the Daleks emerge to kill everyone. The Doctor, however, manages to destroy their static electricity power source because they still need that, apparently, and uses it to melt all the Daleks. Hooray. Sure. And then we get to the last Dalek story on this list, The Evil of the Daleks. This story is notable for a number of reasons. Firstly, only one episode still exists. Secondly, it is the first appearance of the Dalek Emperor.
Doctor! Look at the size of that thing. So, you are the Doctor.
Who has probably the best Dalek voice aside from the other Dalek Emperor.
You destroyed us, Doctor. The Dalek race died in your inferno, but my ship survived.
It was also supposed to be the official final end for the Daleks, but we'll get there in a minute. Basically, the story focuses on a Dalek plan to capture the Doctor and get him to help them distill something they call the Dalek Factor. So because the Daleks have always been losing to the humans, they figure out that we must have something that is stopping them. So they capture the TARDIS, if I remember correctly, and force a Doctor to help them out. The Doctor has a run-in with the Dalek Emperor, who has apparently been pulling the strings this whole time, even though he clearly hasn't been, and then is given a few Daleks to experiment on. He injects them with the human factor, and then sends them back off into Dalek society. The human Daleks will then begin to question the non-human Daleks, and there will be a big civil war. However, the Emperor then pulls a total Uno reverse on the Doctor and says that by finding out what the human factor was, they could then figure out what the Dalek factor was, and that they're going to actually give it to all the humans and turn all the humans into Daleks or something. Anyway, because the Daleks have the TARDIS still, he's going to help them and sprinkle the Dalek factor across the history of Earth. So the Doctor sets up an archway that's supposed to give everyone the Dalek factor when they walk through it. However, it's actually set up to give them all the human factor. So because the Daleks need to find the humanized Daleks, they start sending all the Daleks to the Dalek factor machine to turn them back into Daleks, but instead they actually turn all the Daleks that they go through the archway into human Daleks. And because of the Uno reverse, all these Daleks, they just become humanized. So then a massive civil war breaks out in Skaro between the Daleks loyal to the Emperor and the human Daleks, and all the Daleks just end up wiping each other out completely. And they kill the Emperor in a big climactic end. And, I mean, this story makes exactly zero sense, but it's pretty cool. And it's not that hard to find anymore, because there's actually some pretty good animated recreations of it now. But yeah, this was originally meant to be the final end of the Daleks. Terry Nation basically wanted to try and go for the Dalek TV show again, which obviously failed. However, Sidney Newman, in all his genius, realised that we probably shouldn't actually end the Daleks. So one of the special effects guys found a light bulb in the studio and put it inside the Dalek Emperor's casing, hinting that the Emperor himself might still be alive. But that was originally the final, definitive end to the Daleks. So yeah, that is the original run of the Daleks, the black and white run of the Daleks. What do I think about them? A lot of these episodes are missing, and a lot of them I haven't seen. I'm just running off a synopsis here, or just clips I've seen of them. But there's just something about the Daleks that is just so unique and memorable. They really do have that sort of X factor that just makes them that much more persistent in, like, sort of the cultural zeitgeist, you know? They look silly. They're a silly design, but they're very creepy here. The Daleks have changed a lot. They sort of... I have a few thoughts on this, and I will get into them later throughout this series. I think Davros is a huge mistake. Well, not Davros inherently being a mistake. Like, him in Genesis is great, but, like, after Genesis, Davros should have just stayed dead in Genesis to the Daleks. But anyway, I also think they did turn the Daleks mostly into just being, like, battle tanks. And, like, in these, like, early episodes, they are really crafty. They're very intelligent. And they have this sort of, like, slimy cowardice to them, which they sort of lose as it goes on. They feel like much more like a sort of actual society here, and it feels like they gradually got to this point, as opposed to a lot of the retcons that happen over the course of the series that I don't like. I much prefer the Daleks as they are presented in the Daleks than as they later get retconned in, like, Genesis of the Daleks, for example. Obviously, a lot of this has been completely retconned at this point, but there's some stupid stuff with them, like the static electricity thing, and they're really not that threatening. Their field of vision is so small. Once you get close with Dalek, what's he going to do? Like, and their inability to build things or manipulate objects seems like such a huge weakness. I know a lot of these sort of get changed later on. A problem a lot of these episodes will have with people is they're very, very old and they're very, very slow. Like, they're very boring, I will be honest. Like, I understand it's from the 60s, but, like, man, these are slow. Overall, an extremely, extremely solid start to one of the greatest sci-fi villains of all time. Their sort of xenophobic, supremacist outlook is present from the get-go. And I think the early colour scheme is interesting. Most people now will associate the Daleks being bronze, but people forget, like, they used to be silver and blue. They used to be much more colourful. Obviously, they became like a gunmetal grey kind of colour. But I actually think that the more colourful Daleks do look better. Like, I think the Imperial Daleks and that one variant of Daleks in one of the Third Doctor stories that's like black and silver look really good over the sort of bronze or the gunmetal grey. But there is a definite elegance, sort of alien elegance that's been lost in the Daleks since these early episodes that maybe we'll get back one day. But I really highly doubt it. So yeah, that is the Daleks Part 1. Thanks for watching. I've been completely absent from the internet for like a month at this point. I keep saying this all the time, just life is really busy. But I will be trying to make one video a week on the Daleks to finish this out. This is going to be a long project, but I'm still doing the book reviews. I'm going to be I'm trying to get through Brandon Sanderson's Frugal Wizard's Guide to Surviving Medieval England, but it's quite mid. It's not that gripping really. I've never read Sanderson before. I can't say I'm very impressed, but anyway, if you enjoyed this video and like what I do here, like, subscribe, and if you really want to help out, buy one of my books, there's links in the description, or check out some of my short stories over on my website. Thanks very much.